Alright, hello, I'm Zach, and today I'll be talking to you about human genetic engineering, which is a subtopic of eugenics. For all of you who don't know, eugenics is an ancient, or not ancient, but it's an old philosophy that started before in the 18th century, and it's basically it's about bettering the human race by modifying genes or changing the gene pool before humans reproduce. And genetic engineering, let me just define it real quick, is the direct modification of an organism's genetic material. Today I'll be, sorry, didn't get much practice. Today, my main claim is genetic engineering on humans would have an overall negative impact on society. To back this up, I'll be proving you that advancements in genetic engineering past what they are now could lead to what we call designer babies, which I'll define to you when it comes up. And then after that, the advent of designer babies would lead to artificial discrimination and elitism among humans. So to start with my main point, advancements in genetic engineering would lead to designer babies, or the advent of designer babies. Currently, genetic engineering on humans is restricted to just a few procedures involving in vitro fertilization. The main one being pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, which I'll be referring to from now on as PGD, which is a procedure where scientists use in vitro fertilization to fertilize a batch of eggs and then let the embryo develop for about 3 days, and then after that they analyze the batch of embryos for certain genetic diseases. Currently this is used obviously to treat embryos with, or if parents have genetic diseases that can pass on to their children, they want to be able to screen those out and have a baby which wouldn't have a disease such as colorblindness or hemophilia. However, because this procedure can be used not just to detect genes that cause such diseases, they could also be used to detect such as eye color, hair color, or whatnot. Currently, we've already been able to as of the mid-90s, the first time that humans have actually used this was when two parents, Scott and Monique Collins, had 2 boys and they wanted to have a girl, and so when they went to a clinic, their doctor basically gave them the option to go through PGD and search for an egg which would be XX instead of XY. And this is the first case where in the human race that we've been able to select whether a certain trait of a baby that we want. To go on, in modern day, it's very common that, aside from the cost, it is common that people are able to select the gender of their child. And it's not too far-fetched to think that we could select hair color, eye color, and whatnot else. With the ability to choose these traits, parents who want their children to have certain physical appearances, or maybe be more athletic than others, could lead to what we call designer babies. Basically babies that their parents chose what they want to be. It comes from the term designer clothing. The advent of designer babies will lead to artificial discrimination and elitism among humans. The ability to select certain traits for an offspring will naturally lead to certain ones being preferred over others. Designer humans could have traits that are considered prettier than others or more beautiful, or that would make an individual more physically adept than others. These designer humans will be born with an advantage over naturally born humans who get a mixed bag from their parents. And the cost for these procedures for PGD are extremely high, and they only have a small rate of success, which means that it would be likely that they would need to go through this procedure again if they want to get the results that they wanted. Currently, the average cost for in vitro fertilization is about $12,000 to $1,500 per raw batch of eggs, which yields, I believe, somewhere between 5 and 8, if I remember reading it correctly. And according to the Advanced Fertility Center of Chicago, tacking on PGD would bring this up to anywhere between $17,000 and $25,000, which the average American or citizen worldwide probably could not afford. This would mean that PGD would be something that only the wealthy could afford, and that they would be the only ones allowed to have designer children, at least until costs go down, which, according to the Advanced Fertility Center of Chicago, it is not likely to go down anytime soon, as right now we can only do basic things such as hair color, eye color, and gender. With only the wealthy able to afford designer children, they would be born with the traits that are considered better than a naturally born child, and they would have versus naturally born humans, which would have a mixed bag. Designer children have a competitive edge over those who are born naturally and result in an elite race of humans, not too far from what happened in the 40s with Hitler's Aryan race. This leads me to my final point, that this would lead to elitism among humans such as the Nazi Aryan race, and it would be detrimental to society if we were not to regulate genetic engineering among humans. And that is it. Thank you.
All right, Zach, you introduced the idea of eugenics effectively. You did get a little stuck on the proposition, but you got there finally. And your secondary points kind of run together because it's clearly a chain of arguments. You know, we're going to create designer babies, and designer babies are going to result in this particular outcome. So I can see how those points are related to each other. I do think that you need to have clearer declarative statements on those. You signpost the first point when you get to well, actually, I should say you've got in the preview the 2 points that you're identifying, but when you get to the body of the speech, there's not really much of a signpost on the first point, and the second point is not distinct at all. So, having set up a preview, I think you need to be a little bit clearer on that. There's actually maybe a third point that you're making right at the end. I don't know if it's really a distinct point or if it's supposed to be part of that second issue that you're talking about, and that's the idea of these competitive advantages that the kids are going to have, and the kind of analogy to the Nazi movement of eugenics that you're talking about. I think that you kind of explain the theory behind this. The idea that this is going to occur, I think, is a little bit problematic. The PGD you defined pretty well. I didn't get any source citations on all of this except for the 2 fertility clinic quotes that you had, which talked about the costs and what they could potentially be doing on those kinds of things. So it was sex, eye color, and hair color were the things that you mentioned.
Currently, we.
Yeah. So, and you said it's limited by the technology at the time, that sort of thing. So if it's really restricted to a limited group of people, and the 3 things that they can affect are sex, eye color, and hair color, I'm having a hard time imagining the competitive advantage that blonde, blue-eyed girls or brown-eyed, red-headed boys are going to have. I mean, this is very speculative at this particular point. It's interesting to have in like a science fiction story or a hypothetical scenario, but as a practical problem, I think you've pointed out one of the issues. It's not likely to be widespread because of the cost issue in the first place. And then if it does occur, why is it something that we should worry about? Why is it something that we should be concerned with? So what if the super rich want to spend $1 billion to have a blonde-haired kid? I got to be perfectly honest with you. If you wanted to have a blonde-haired kid, you know what your best thing to do is? Marry a blonde. And it's a lot cheaper than spending all that money on it, and you're much more likely to get what you want out of that situation. Why is that a bad thing? Why should we be worried about those kinds of things? We already have people doing that kind of stuff in their self-selection of who they want to, for lack of a more genteel term, mate with and reproduce with, that sort of thing. So I think there's in essence an idea that there's some danger here that you need to demonstrate a little bit more. All right. I got to stop because we do still have a couple more people that we want to get in here. So, Nam? You're up.